So again, thank you for coming out. What we're going to do is just kind of quickly go through. So this section, this little lunch and learn, is called Dashboards and Robots. And what we're really going to do is just kind of give you a quick introduction to data mining and machine learning, which I know many of you are already familiar with. I'm hoping to put a slightly different spin on it than probably what you're used to. So hopefully there'll be some value add for you being online with us for 15, 20, 30 minutes this afternoon. So with that, let me go ahead and get going. Really, it's pretty basic. What we're going to do is I'm just going to talk about what is it, why you should care, why should you care, how does it work, and then we're going to open it up for any questions and comments that you might have. So what are we talking about? Dashboards and robots. Well, what we're really talking about is a suite of products that allow institutions to potentially predict outcomes, prescribe actions, and automate decisions. It was funny because I was looking at an article that I wrote, and I just was laughing about the first sentence, and it said, because of digital intelligent assistance, your world has changed and will never be the same. And that is now true. So what are we really talking about? Well, we're talking about digital assistants and what has happened in the world and how it's affecting us as business analysts, and how we're going to have to rethink a lot of things that we have been trained are going to have to adapt to what's already here. So it's not like this is coming in the future. It's that it's already here. And for many of us, the literature and the material and the way we were trained, while it's not irrelevant, we have to add new skills to our skill sets. And the thing that I'm always trying to talk to people about is the difference between having what I call a labor mindset, which is kind of how we were trained as analysts. And I know this because I teach analysts, and I've been teaching analysts for the last 15 years. And the material that we use to teach business analysts, to teach them on how to build products and process, the 4 steps of elicit, analyze, document, and validate, is usually what I consider to be more of a labor mindset. We're focused on human stakeholders and trying to elicit requirements from human stakeholders to build products or improve processes. Great. That mindset will never go away. It's been around for, as long as we've been around, and it will continue to use that going forward. But now we have something new that we need to embrace, which is this data mindset. And the data mindset is really tied to this concept of assistance. And right now the term I use is digital assistant, which is a very rudimentary kind of functioning assistant, very much like Alexa, if you have Alexa at your house, or if you use Cortana or Siri or Google. They all have a version of a digital assistant. Some are more intelligent than others. And that really has to do with what is known as conversation turns, where you say something and then it talks back to you, and then you reply and it replies back to you, and you can have a conversation that goes back and forth. Predominantly today, most of our assistants are like a monologue where we provide a command and then it reacts and tells us that the command was accepted and then it went ahead and did what it was supposed to do. It's not really a conversation or a dialogue yet, but in many instances, it's moving in that case, or it's moving in that direction. And as business analysts, where do we fit in that process? How are we adapting to make sure that this is where we're going, making sure that, hey, when we elicit requirements, that we're covering all this ground to make sure that we've got, the future thought about as we go forward. So what are we talking about? Well, if you look at this slide, you can see that use cases, right now just showing, predominant use cases are customer service, e-commerce, healthcare, business application, foreign language tutoring, tax filing and processing. And of course, there's a lot of use cases. These are just the major categories are expanding like crazy. So here we are in 2020, and you can see where by the next 5 years, it will really explode. And kind of what are we really talking about? Well, within all these different segments, like retail segment or financial services or healthcare or marketing, you have all the different, sales and marketing, use cases, for example, just in retail, demand forecasting, loyalty programs, cross-sell and upsell, customer acquisition. On the CFO side, you have finance and risk, fraud detection, pricing strategy. Under your marketing as well, customer and channel, personalization, lifetime customer value, product segmentation. All of these concepts are being brought in-house now for us as analysts, that we have to go and elicit requirements a little bit differently than what we've been doing in the past. And that's really kind of what I'm hoping to present to you guys today, is just thinking about that, where it's going, and potentially how you fit into this. So how does this work? So the term that most of us are probably familiar with is business intelligence. And that's really where I'm going to start. It's that if you're working right now in any kind of shop, there is somewhere in your shop somebody looking at dashboards. I mean, probably if nowhere else, it's definitely in your CFO's office. And these dashboards, as you know, are reporting back data. And of course, if you've been working on business intelligence projects, you know that just because they have data doesn't mean that it's right. That's a whole conversation that we can bring up at the end, but assume for a moment that your shop has all the data correct and everything's great. So now let's just focus on a perfect world. So what are we really trying to do? Well, first of all, as a business analyst, we're trying to figure out and help management identify actual problems to solve. And then we bring in, with those problems, a team of people, and we'll kind of go through the team here in a little bit, to help identify our data sources, define the data path, then create cleansing and homogenizing processes, which is, so the vetting the data sources, you'll see where I've kind of got that role as a project manager, scrum master. You'll see I've got labels for all these. So the gentleman at the very top, he's your business analyst, product owner. And then underneath I have kind of a project manager, scrum master, and underneath I have a system architect. Underneath that I have a developer. Underneath that I have a tester. And then at the bottom, I have an intelligent assistant. And that's really what I'm trying to expose to you today, is that your team of the future is changing. And we need to adapt and accommodate, or how do we adapt and accommodate for the fact that it's all changing? Anyway, so as we move down this process, we've got, at the top, we're identifying the problems, and then we're cleaning or identifying our data sources, and we're cleaning our data. Then our developer or data scientist is going through what's known as feature selection, and then they're training the analytic models, whether it's predictive or classification oriented. And then our testers are also transitioning into, well, they're really still doing the same thing that they've always done, which is evaluating the output and the presentation instruments. And then finally, we're deploying the solution and eliciting feedback at a user acceptance level to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. All right, so first of all, for those of you that aren't familiar with business intelligence, let me talk about what it is and kind of just give you a really quick primer on dashboards. So I know just from talking to literally thousands of business analysts that if you ask most people who aren't business analysts, they will say that the role of a business analyst is to gather requirements. And I always have to joke about that, in that for those of us in this job, requirements are never just laying around so that we could go gather them. We have to elicit these requirements. And we do it within a context or framework. And again, people who aren't in the business, the stakeholders who don't do what we do, don't realize that it's an accounting framework that we operate within. And so I always tell people when I teach in a requirements class, this is an accounting class. And they're looking at me like, what? I thought it was a technology class. And I said, everything falls under accounting. And especially when you look at it from a dashboard level. So just to make things really, really simple, the way data is kind of presented to us is either historical or it's future oriented. And we use historical data to describe future outcomes. So we say that status, which is historical, drives forecast. And every institution has a different level of maturity about how they present data and how they forecast data. So every company's different. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But in a perfect world, it would look something like what you see on the slide, where, at the lower level, you've got just your transactional data where you're looking at your data quality. And then you have where it says in the lower, I'm looking at the diagonal that's going up the screen. Okay. Then you get to descriptive, which is what we commonly refer to today as business intelligence. And basically almost everything on that dashboard is historical in nature, which comes from your accounting systems, both financial and non-financial accounting systems. Having that data, and depending on how good it is, how historically accurate it is, would allow institutions to then do diagnostics on their institution, and then from that diagnostics be able to forecast, which would be the predictive model. And that's kind of where people are really sort of at right now. The ultimate level, and if you listen to like the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, he talks about prescriptive analytics and eventually semantic reasoning with the information systems, with this concept of the digital transformation, where as we put data onto more devices at the edge of the cloud, we will get better information back, which would then allow us to do better predictive analytics, better prescriptive analytics, and eventually have semantic reasoning with our machines, which is what most people call artificial intelligence. And quite honestly, we're quite a ways away from that. Anybody that's really following that will probably tell you that, you're looking at about 2040, potentially to get to true AI. It may happen sooner, but if you know anything about the granularity of the data and the fact that there's still a lot of issues with data, we're quite a ways away from that. So, but you'll also notice on this slide, you'll see the Amazon Alexa voice control device, and you'll see the little intelligent assistant. I took that picture. That's Cortana from the game. And then underneath it is a dashboard, which is really commonly seen in a project management office, which is a portfolio that is using the efficient frontier to allow the people at the portfolio level to determine risk ratio for each of the projects that are in their portfolio. So without really getting into too much detail, we have a lot of this technology today. As a matter of fact, we have all of it today. The question is how are our business analysts adapting to this? Okay. And so I just wanted to kind of go through really quickly and give you sort of a roadmap to start thinking about, hey, this is what we can do to embrace what's already here, really. It's just, how do we embrace what's here? So again, with business intelligence at the very top of the institution, and again, I'm using kind of a scalable agile model. So I apologize if your shop doesn't do scalable agile, but it's not too far removed from what most institutions are doing, this model. At the very top, there's a vision. And the executives go through their scorecard, their balanced scorecard, strategic planning, and come up with a set of objectives that creates a roadmap. Those are then decomposed into a portfolio of large-scale projects that really now become departmental programs and then become more transactional projects as they get down to the lower levels, which is pretty much where a lot of us are on a day-to-day basis, down at the project level. All right. And the data, the theory is that the data decomposes down to the project level as a plan, and then the actuals roll up, and the difference is known as variance analysis, which then drives our dashboards. Okay, this is again assuming that all the data is corrected, and more importantly, that it's all clean. Which anybody that's in this knows it's usually neither of those. So, but we're giving you the vision. This is the vision. And the thought of the future is that we will have institutions, and you probably do, where a lot of the work, the labor, we've been dealing with like human labor, will now actually be done directly by machines. So in this slide, I have kind of the two photographs, and on the left, I sort of snagged that from Microsoft, the Power BI, and it shows the dashboards and, someone working from a dashboard. And then on the right, you have a laboratory where there's no humans. So there's a manufacturing facility where there's no humans, and you can see, I put Cortana on the screen, on the little computer screen, and just shows you the process of, getting the data. This is the machine learning process, cleaning, preparing, and manipulating the data, training the model, testing the data, and then obviously improving your process. So all of this has been already thought out. And that's the good news for us as business analysts. And even though the certified business data analyst credential has recently been identified and documented on the IIBA website, the good news is that this is not new at all. As a matter of fact, this slide right here is probably 1996 timeframe. So it's pretty old. It's as old as my daughter. So I always think about it like that, where it's not that we have these ideas. That's the thing for any of you that have been in IT a really long time. You know that a lot of stuff comes up and it just takes a really long time for it to kind of deploy out to the market where everybody's dealing with it. So, and in a way, that's good news for us because it gives us time to get ourselves ready. Even though technology's happening at a record pace, luckily for us, the underlying standards, which is kind of how we as business analysts operate, that's kind of moving along a little bit slower. But this standard is a six level standard. The CBDA, Certified Business Data Analyst, is 5 because they consolidated data understanding and data prep into the same one. But fundamentally, it's always going to be the same. And the thing you got to keep in mind is that you can't have a robot until you have data mining. That's the piece that I want you to take away from this, that the robot doesn't exist without the data. A robot means data. So when you hear data or you're a robot, oh, there's a robot, especially software robot, that just simply means it's data. It's an automated process of data. So what's good is that this was already figured out by a bunch of different large scale corporations and entities, and they created something called the cross-industry standard process for data mining and machine learning, otherwise known as the CRISP DMML, which I highly recommend you go look up. And after the class, if you want any information on this, just send me an email and I'll send you back things that I have or places to go look for it. So it's not as common anymore. But the thing that I want you to take away from this is that I took this model and applied it to a team. And I want you to start thinking about, as an analyst, your team of the future. So one of the things that I'm always trying to tell business analysts is that we are lucky in that we get to design work for other people. I mean, a lot of times we don't think of it like that, but when you're writing requirements, you're actually designing work for somebody to go execute. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the requirements that we create have always been about labor oriented, product. We got to, hey, what's the labor designed to build the product, or what's the labor involved in creating a process? But there hasn't been very much information on how to exactly write requirements to train a robot. And I'm hoping to fix that because that's where the future is. So the idea that you're going to be training a device that takes parts of your job away is not intuitive. And so you can understand why there's not a lot of information on it yet, because most people don't want to do that, especially now in a situation like this where we are under, a pandemic and millions of jobs have been lost and things of that nature. So, but the reality of the situation is that companies are having to operate even more lean than they were before. So they're going to leverage that technology even further. So it's not like it's it's going to go away because people are unemployed. If anything, it's going to accelerate because companies need to leverage what resources they have available to them right now, which is the technology. Thing to keep in mind is that everything that a company needs to do what I'm about to talk about, they already have in shop. There's no new technology that your company has to buy, none at all. There's no new hardware, there's no new software. It's just really procedural and how you as a group put it together, what you decide to do to put it together. So there's 6 players and there's 6 steps, and I'm just going to kind of quickly walk you through those, and then I'll open the floor to any kind of questions that you might have. So the first step is what I would see as the role of the business analyst / product owner. And I know that a lot of places, those are 2 different roles. But in some places they're the same. So again, I always tell everybody there's no right or wrong way. There's just different ways. So in my world, they're the same person, product owner, business analyst. And their job is to really understand the business, both from a technology side, but also from an accounting side. So their capability is to go speak to the chief financial officer, understand at a high level financial accounting metrics, KPIs, and non-financial KPIs, and then speak to all of the stakeholders who are involved and discover what kind of dashboard problems they can help solve. So that's determining your business objectives, assessing your situation, determining your data mining goals, and then helping the team come up with a project plan. Okay, now all of these, by the way, this is all standard stuff. This isn't me. I didn't create any of this. I just put pictures. That's all I did. As a part of your team, you have to have somebody that is, let's call it data savvy from an understanding of the data dictionary. And that's something that I want to kind of touch on. I think it's really important going forward that business analysts be very knowledgeable about data dictionaries. And if you're not knowledgeable about that, I think that's something that you need to make a note on and go back and learn as much as you can about the data dictionary. Because the data dictionary, well, there's lots of them, first of all. That's part of the problem. But it drives everything else. So at the end of the day, everything that we're going to be talking about as we go forward on these lunch and learns is going to be tied back to the data dictionary. All right. So there's a person who on my team would be my project manager, my scrum master, would also be one of my experts on the data dictionary. I think it's absolutely a great responsibility for someone in that role to really truly understand how to collect the data, how to describe the data, how to explore the data, and how to verify the quality of the data. Then there's another person on your team that is kind of a system architect, IT level individual who we call data wranglers. And some of you may be data wranglers, I don't know. And their job is, well, they really kind of own the data warehouse. Their job is to take transactional data and denormalize it into, join files that can then be turned into OLAP cubes, then run the process up to senior management in the form of dashboards. And I want to clarify something. I'm not sure if people know this or not, but in standard project management, in standard business analysis courses, when we talk about data behavior, usually the only thing we discuss is an ERD, an entity relationship diagram, which is great, except that only discusses transactional data. It doesn't talk about the transformation of transactional data into join files or star schema for the purposes of analysis. And so we don't really teach business analysts about star schemas and how to generate OLAP cubes and how to build business intelligence visualizations, which I think absolutely should be a part of the domain of a business analyst, of the knowledge set of a business analyst. So I'm hoping to try to resolve some of that. But right now, that's kind of the role of the system architect, to do that data transformation, extract, transform, and load, and then provide that data to the dashboard for senior executive. Let's call it user acceptance testing. All right. Also in this group is a developer or a data scientist or some form of subject matter expert whose job it is to, select modeling techniques and generate test designs and build models and assess models. And then we have our test group, QA tester, who can come in and evaluate the results and review the process and determine next steps. Finally, the last kind of step is deploying the solution. And you'll notice that I have Intelligent Assistant as part of deployment. And that's really how you know that deployment is successful, is that you have an active Intelligent Assistant who can answer questions regarding historical data and then provide predictive analytics for the future or forecasting for the future. And really what Intelligent Assistance is basically putting what's known as cognitive services, layering it on top of your dashboard. So you have your dashboard, it's always going to be there. And now what you're doing is you're putting cognitive services, which is, voice and vision and, all the things that we take kind of as an assistant, an Alexa model, let's call it, or a Cortana model or whatever, and adding that extra layer to enable human voice to communicate with the devices themselves. So all the technology's there, it's just all coming together. So as a business analyst, we need to be participating in that. All right. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, I figured I'd do about 30 minutes of the topic and then open up the floor to any kind of questions or comments or thoughts, or see what you guys think. So any thoughts, any questions? Anybody working on assistance right now as part of requirements? Or dashboards? Do I have any dashboard? Anybody working on dashboards as a part of requirements? I'm looking at my chat over here.
This is Caitlin. So I work in marketing, but I know that one of our hardest problems that we're attempting to overcome right now is the appropriate dashboard. I was just in a meeting right now, and that was, data is important, data is great. Everybody loves dashboards, but if it's not pulling in the right data, it means nothing to you. So we're doing a whole analysis right now on what data is appropriate to our institutions. We can see it at a glance, but really digging in and trying to align all of our key stakeholders with the appropriate data, and understanding across all the businesses has been extremely difficult.
Yeah, that's you just nailed it. It said everybody has a different vision of what is important to them, and trying to come up with a simple to use dashboard that will actually be used. As a matter of fact, a lot of institutions, the executives don't even look at the dashboard. They have an assistant look at the dashboard. And so they don't actually use the dashboards that are being made for them. They have someone else to look at those.
I had a banker the other day tell me that it's more important to them to hire a chief data officer than a chief marketing officer, because data is the future and they need to figure out what data they're pulling from.
Right. And what's funny about that is that's been the same situation for the last 30 years. this very thing that we're seeing as like a new concept is the same. I mean, you can go back 30 years and read business intelligence articles, and they have the same, even to this day, the same complaint about, reporting and how do we get the reports and how we build the dashboard, how to make it easy. And what happens though, this is the thing you got to keep in mind as a business analyst. What's going to happen is the data is only the first step. They're going to want intelligent assistance. And if they don't have the dashboard set up properly, it's really hard, actually almost impossible, to have intelligence, because it comes from the dashboards. That's why this is such a critical thing now, is that, oh, wait a second, we've got these intelligent assistants. But right now, if most organizations are deploying them on very small things, like the little chat bots, they only do a very small segment of what's going on. They don't do the entire institution's knowledge base. They just do, one small segment that they already know they have a data feed that they can rely back on. like a ServiceNow repository with a chatbot on the front of it, something like that. So let's see. I've been working on some stuff, Cliff says, with Microsoft Azure. So Azure, Microsoft, to their credit, has done phenomenal work enabling this technology for free. So for those of you that are interested and want to look at other stuff, I highly recommend you look at Microsoft's Azure products, Azure Suite, because they're really trying to push the envelope, and they're enabling literally anybody who's got time to go research all of that information available to them. That's the good news about Microsoft. The bad news about Microsoft is they, every couple of years, change names, and they go off in another direction, and then their literature stops, and there's like a break in their documentation, and you can't get any further. So that's the downside, is they don't stick with it for a long time. I mean, they do, but then they don't. So, I mean, anybody that's had to transition from Team Foundation to Azure DevOps knows what I'm talking about. It's like, oh, it's the same thing. It's got another name, and I got to look it up and all that kind of stuff. So any other thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. So let me tell you what we're doing is with these is I have a class that I teach, and it's requirements development and management, and specifically for data as opposed to product and process. I mean, I teach those as well, but this is specifically for data. And in that course, I have kind of foundational items that I said, hey, I'll just take 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes to provide this information to anybody that's, interested, over like, these little lunch and learns for the next couple of months, and just to help you out, if nothing else. So let me put my email up if anybody's got any questions, and I'll send this to you, the slide, not the whole slide deck, but I'll send this section to you as a PDF file. All you got to do is send me an email, just say, user group, whatever. I'll know it was today, and I'll send this out to you just to have as a, takeaway if you're interested. So any other questions or thoughts, or are you finding as a group, are you finding that you're running into data issues now? Are you starting to see more of that, or are you, what's going on with that? We're almost done, so I'm just asking the question.
Hey, Richard, this is Renee.
Okay.
I'm sitting here trying to wrap my brain around some things that you were saying that really resonated with me. I'm currently a product owner in a digital robotics practice.
Awesome.
And so, yes, but the interesting thing is for me that all the stuff you talked about regarding understanding the data and dashboards for predicting outcomes, my business partners want to do that in almost a policing function. So they want to look at what the development teams are doing and what their individual contributors end up doing with the product and process they have already prescribed.
Right.
And I'm just like kind of blown away, because we need to focus our energy on doing that up front so that we're doing smart work instead of doing work smartly. So thank you. I'm just really struggling to take it in, but I'm overwhelmed in a good way.
Good. No, that's good. So the next one we do, we're going to talk about structured requirements, and I'm going to actually get in and talk about data, like requirements for data. Like the next one I do is going to look like, oh, this is what requirements for data looks like, as opposed to just what we're used to seeing requirements look like. And then the one after that, I'm going to do on requirements and testing, because at the end of the day, test cases. So I'll leave you guys with this. Test cases are requirements that we use to train robots. And just that thought alone is kind of mind blowing, because if you're not used to doing test cases, you need to start studying test cases now. Like if you're a business analyst and you want to stay in this career for a long time, get to know test cases and software testing like crazy, because that's really the future of requirements is test cases, software testing. So, and if you figure out your testing properly, then it backs its way out to when you go to elicit requirements from your stakeholders, it makes it really easy for you to start to understand how, like, what they're saying versus what you have to produce at the very end. So it shows you how to connect those dots. So the next one we do, I'll talk specifically about, what is the language of data? What does it look like? And that's the thing. No one ever said, oh, what does it look like? Now I'm going to show you on the next one. So any other thoughts before we call it? Okay, so just send me, again, an email. Just say, user group or whatever, or lunch and learn or anything you want, dashboards and robots. I'll send you back a PDF of this presentation that we did today. And then hopefully you'll be here next time. Pass the word, spread the word, and hopefully this is a good use of your time. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.